Hello, Kent. How are you?
Good, and you?
Sorry, this is my new weekly position.
At least
Joys
you're
of
moving,
not having a car. Sorry?
at least you're moving ahead.
Yeah. Doing my best. How's it, John? Hello, Ryan.
Hi,
Still
John.
driving. I've been driving for a week.
Yeah, I'm on my way down up to Johannesburg.
Okay. Where have you been, Rabbi?
No, joking. No, I'm just going from Cape Town to Blouberg. I'm sorry, from Blouberg to Cape Town.
Okay.
Hi,
Hello,
Rabbi.
Jeff.
Hi, Kent. Hi, John.
Hello,
Jeff.
Jeff.
Right.
Hello, Jeff. Everyone.
David.
Hi, Rabbi. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Okay.
Everyone.
So today's halachot. One second. Today's halachot, as I mentioned in the note, address the duties of a Jewish husband. There are certain that come, some elements of the law come from the biblical obligations, and some is rabbinic. So let's have a look. Hilchas Ishrus, Perek Yud Beis, Halacha Aleph. When a man, welcome Andrew. When a man marries a woman,
Thank you, Rabbi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Yeah.
Hey. Whether she is a virgin or a non-virgin, whether she is above the age of majority or a minor, whether she was born Jewish, as a convert or a free slave, he incurs 10 responsibilities towards her and receives 4 privileges. In other words, his duties outweigh his what he gets for it, but as we'll see, it's not that simple. Just want to point out the whole idea of a minor. The Torah is not in any way encouraging or condoning the marriage of a child. What halacha is doing is governing the prevalent custom, or what was a prevalent custom at the time, which was that a woman on her own would not be gainfully employed, and therefore it was the duty on her father to care for her. Anyways, be that as it may, so it's a long discussion, and I don't think we can address it fully, but it is something which does deserve more treatment. Okay, halacha beis. What are the 10 responsibilities? 3 stem from Torah, and they are she'era, ksusa, ve'inasa. What do they mean? It's actually this week's parsha. She'era means providing her with substance, her food. Ksusa means supplying her with clothing, and inasa refers to conjugal rights, which is sexual intimacy. But I should point out the word oina literally means time. And what is it that a woman wants from her husband? Is time. It's a mitzvah on a husband to spend time with his wife, doing nothing else other than performing that. The 7 responsibilities ordained by the rabbis are all conditions of marriage contract established by the court. The first is the fundamental requirement of the marriage contract. The others are referred to as Tnai Ksuba. What are they? A, to provide medical treatment if she becomes sick. B, to redeem her if she's captive. C, to bury her if she dies. D, to provide for her from his possessions. E, the right for her to continue living in his home after his death as long as she remains a widow. F, the right for her daughters to receive their substance from his estate after his death until they become consecrated. And G, the right for her sons to inherit her ksuba in addition to their share in her husband's estate together with their brothers born by other wives if she dies before her husband does. In other words, that if he had more than one wife and she dies before he does, her children can still call in the rights to her ksuba in addition to their rights of, meaning from his estate, in addition to their rights as a part of everything else. The four privileges that a husband is granted are all rabbinic in origin. And I think it's incredible to point that out, that by Torah law, he wouldn't even necessarily be getting these, right? She'era ksusa ve'einasa. The three basic responsibilities of a husband to a wife are food, clothing, and time, unconditional. The sages added in a layer of benefits and a layer of responsibilities. And what are they? The rights to the fruits of her labor, the right to any ownerless object she discovers, the right to benefit for the profits of her property during her lifetime, and the right to inherit her property if she dies during his lifetime. His rights to her property supersede the rights of all others. In other words, loans, liabilities that she may have incurred during that time. Second. Okay. Our sages also ordained that the fruit of a wife's labor should parallel her subsistence. And the obligation to redeem her should parallel the right to the benefit from her property. And the obligation to bury her should parallel the right to inherit the property mentioned in her ksuba. In other words, the reason why he has the rights to her income is because he provides for everything of it. Therefore, if a woman says, I will not hold you obligated for my subsistence, but I will not work, she's given this option. She cannot be compelled to work. If her husband says, I will not provide you for your subsistence and I will not receive to the fruits of your labor, he is not given this option, meaning there's no option of marrying and not getting this obligation. Because of this institution, obligation to provide for a woman's subsistence is considered to be one of the T'nai Ksuba. Whether or not these matters were written in the marriage contract, indeed, even if a marriage contract was not written and the couple are merely married, once they marry, the husband is granted the 4 privileges mentioned and the woman is granted the 10 rights mentioned. There is no need to state them explicitly. In other words, the Ksuba, as we learned earlier in the week, details the difficulty that the sages put into place for a husband to divorce his wife because of the great cost that he will incur. And that is the ksuba. But even if they marry without the ksuba, all of these conditions kick in. The husband made a stipulation for the obligation, the wife made a stipulation that the husband would not be granted one of these privileges, the other party agreed. The stipulation is binding. So in other words, all the conditions are okay, with exception of 3 matters.
Rabbi, your voice is breaking up all the time.
Sorry. Not sure. To do it better. Okay now.
No, still breaking up. Sorry.
Hi, my apologies.
That
Okay,
Better now.
if the husband made a stipulation that he would not be responsible for one of his obligations, okay, sorry, we're towards the end of halacha 6. So if a stipulation was made with regard to these 3 matters, it is of no consequence. These 3 are the woman's conjugal rights, the fundamental requirement of the marriage contract, and the husband's right to inherit his wife's property. What do we mean? If the groom made a stipulation with the bride that he's not obligated to give her conjugal rights, his stipulation is of no substance. We made a stipulation, and the stipulation doesn't concern financial matters. When a man makes a stipulation to reduce of the fundamental requirement of the marriage contract, or he writes a ksuba for either 200 or 100 zuz, but she writes she already received a portion of the sum which he did not, again, his stipulation is no substance. For whenever a person establishes a marriage contract with a virgin for less than 200 zuz, or with a non-virgin for less than 100 zuz, the sexual relations he conducts with his wife are considered promiscuous. In other words, if he's not obligating himself to her, if he's not taking on the responsibility of honoring her, then the relations that he has are considered entirely inappropriate. What if he makes it after he weds her? If he makes a stipulation after he weds her that he will not inherit her property, his stipulation is of no consequence. Although the husband's right to inherit his wife's property is a rabbinic institution, our sages reinforce their edict, giving it the power of a statute of the Torah. Okay, so again, his inheriting her on her passing is considered of strong significance. With regard to the Torah statutes of inheritance, all stipulations that are made are of no consequence, despite the fact that financial matters are concerned, as we learned from the Pasuk Lechukas Mishpat, the statutes of judgment, and the Gemara learns out from there that therefore the conditions wouldn't apply. With regard to the other aspects of the marriage contract, the stipulation made by the husband and accepted by the wife is binding. For example, if he made a stipulation that he's not obligated to supply her with to provide for her with clothing, that would not receive the benefits from her property, the stipulation is binding. What is the amount that is designated? Okay, now, as the Rambam will stipulate later on, these numbers are the minimum. But as he will say later on, as the wealth of the husband increases, his duties to his wife increase with that as well. We allot her bread for 2 meals every day according to the norm of the people of her town for a person who is neither sick nor a glutton, meaning a sick who has little or a glutton who takes a lot. The allotment is also made according to the type of bread eaten as a staple in that locale, be it wheat or barley, rice, millet, or other grains, as is customary in that locale. Similarly, she is allotted other foods that are eaten together with bread, in other words, legumes, vegetables, and the like. She is also allotted oil for food and to light a lamp, and also fruit, a small amount of wine, if it is the local custom for a woman to drink wine. On the Shabbos, she is allotted 3 meals and meat or fish according to the local custom. She is given a may of silver for her private needs. For example, given a pruta for laundry, for the bath, the like, general basic upkeep. To whom does the above apply? To a poor Jewish man. But if the husband is of means, the support he is required to provide his wife is a portion according to his wealth. If he is wealthy enough to provide her with several dishes of meat each day, he is compelled to do so. And she is allotted subsistence commensurate with his wealth. If he is extremely poor and he is unable to provide his wife with even the bread she requires, he is compelled to divorce her, and he remains indebted for her ketubah until he finds the means to provide payment for it, and that duty comes first. Okay, now is to provide his wife with substance as he befits her on condition that she should eat and drink alone, and that he should eat and drink alone. He is given this prerogative, provided he eats together with her on Friday night. Again, we're speaking here, obviously, of a suboptimal situation, to say the least. When a woman has been allotted substance and her entire allotment was not used, the remainder belongs to her husband. If her husband is a priest, he is not entitled to provide her with all her provisions from tshuva, from truma, right? Because she's married to a kohen, so she's allowed to eat it. He could say, take from truma. No. He is not given this option because it's difficult for her to protect the truma from contracting ritual impurity and to eat it while ritually pure herself. Eating truma is a complicated thing. Instead, he should give her half her provisions from ordinary food and half from truma. Because obviously for a kohen, a significant amount of his income comes from truma, so we need to at least give him that option of some of it. Yudalit, just as a man is required to provide his wife with her subsistence, he is required to provide for the maintenance of his children, both male maintenance until they reach maturity as ordained by our sages. In other words, obviously there was a time and an era when at the age of 6 children were already working. But if that is not the norm, then as long as they need to be cared for, they need to until they're able to take care of themselves. If, however, he does not, he should be rebuked and embarrassed publicly, and appeals should be made to him. If he persists in his refusal, a public announcement is made with regard to him. So and so is cruel and does not desire to provide for the maintenance of his children. He is worse than an impure bird which doesn't provide for its chicks. Nevertheless, he should not be compelled to provide for the maintenance of children 6 and older. To what does the above apply? To a person who is not known to have resources and it is not known whether he is capable of giving charity. If, however, he has resources and he possesses the means to give an amount of charity that will provide for his children's needs, his property is expropriated against his will for the purposes of charity, and his children's needs are provided for until they reach the age of majority, until they reach adulthood. One of my first experiences here in South Africa when as a rabbi, was about a month after I came. I was still living at my in-laws in Johannesburg, looking into different rabbinic opportunities, and I was actually told this story earlier in the week in Ashir. I was staying with my in-laws in Johannesburg, and Rabbi Goldman took me with him to court, where Rabbi Kurtztag was defending the right of the Beth Din to put a fellow into Cherem that excommunicated him, shouldn't be
Rabbi, you're freezing.
with a minion. He shouldn't be. People should
Could you
try
read-
to avoid
could you
paying
read-
child support. And the Bezdin put him into Cherem, and he said,
Rabbi, can you start there? One from the beginning. We never heard a thing.
Yeah, you're frozen, Rabbi.
the rights of the Beth. What's that?
You're frozen. We haven't heard anything.
Could
From
you
the
please
time-
go back? Could you
from
please
the
go
time
back?
you went with Rabbi Goldman to the Beth Din.
You hear me now?
Now we can hear you here.
Where did you hear up until?
When you went with Rabbi Goldman.
Oh, to the Beth Din, to the High
Yes.
Court of Johannesburg, where Rabbi Kurtztag was taken to court. The Beth Din was taken to court by a fellow who was not paying child support to provide for his children. And the Beth Din summoned him for a hearing, and he refused to come. And they warned him again and again and again. And ultimately, he refused, and they put him into Cherem for that, where people were stopping to do business with him. He wasn't being counted for a minion. And he took Rabbi Kurtztag to court for violating his constitutional rights. And the judge, of course, upheld the Beth Din's position, but it was exactly on this halacha where we are required to compel a father who has means, and this gentleman obviously did, who has means to provide for his children, that he should. Sorry about that. Okay. Just as the court expropriates and sells the property of a husband who traveled to another country to provide for the subsistence of his wife, so too it expropriates and sells property to provide for the subsistence of his sons and daughters who are 6 years old or less. If, however, they're more than 6 years old, the court doesn't provide for the substance from his property when he is not present, even when he is reputed to have means. In other words, we don't interfere in the estate. Similarly, when a person loses his mental faculties, the court expropriates his property and sells it to provide subsistence and other necessities for his wife and his children below the age of 6. Again, 6 being the youngest age when at that time children could try to take care of themselves. But today, obviously, society has evolved and that age would be significantly higher. 18. Some Ga'anim rule that assessment should not be made for the subsistence of a woman whose husband overseas or died unless she evinces possession of her ksuba document. If she doesn't evince possession of her ksuba, she is not entitled to subsistence. Why? Perhaps she has already received payment for her ksuba from her husband, or perhaps she forfeited her ksuba in his favor, as will be explained. Others maintain that an assessment is made on her behalf for her subsistence, where we accept it as a presumption that she neither received payment for nor forfeited her ksuba, hence she is not required to show her ksuba when presenting her claim. I favor the latter view that Rambam says. It's very rare that the Rambam brings down argument and put forward his position. One of the reasons why the Rambam is not considered the final view on halacha is because he doesn't provide his sources and differing opinions, whereas the Shulchan Aruch does. But here's one of the rare cases where he does, and he says, I favor the latter view with regard to women whose husbands have departed, since her claim to her subsistence stems from the Torah itself. It's not, it's not an extra that the sages added on. With regard to a woman whose husband died, however, she's not entitled to her subsistence until she brings her ksuba. Why? For she derives her subsistence in that situation by virtue of a rabbinic enactment, and therefore, if you want to take it out of the husband's estate, the inheritors can say, well, prove it. Furthermore, her subsistence is paid from property belonging to her husband's heirs, and the court always advances claims in support of the interests of an heir. Halacha Yates, if a woman's husband departed on a journey and she borrowed money for her subsistence, her husband is required to pay the debt when he returned. If a person voluntarily took the initiative, though, for providing for her, when the husband returns, the husband's not required to pay that person. The other person forfeited his money. The rationale being the husband didn't instruct him to provide for her, nor did she request the assistance as a loan. So just because you took care of the wife while the husband was gone doesn't mean the husband now owes you, unless she asked for it as a loan. Chaf, when a husband plans to depart on a journey, he tells his wife, use your earnings to purchase your subsistence. She has no right to demand her subsistence from him afterwards because he gave her the rights to her income. If she had not accepted this agreement and she had not felt confident, she could have issued a claim against him or told him her earnings are not sufficient for me. So because she accepted the arrangement, there's no claim to be made later. The following rule applies if the woman took the matter to court and was awarded an assessment for her subsistence. The court sold then her husband's landed property and gave her the proceeds, or she sold the property herself. Then afterwards the husband came and claimed that he left provisions for her. She is required to take an oath while holding a sacred article that he did not make provisions for her, and she is not held liable. The following rule applies when a husband departed on a journey and the woman didn't take the matter to court, nor sell the property, but instead waited until she returned. If upon his return there is dispute, he claims, I made provisions for you. Or she claims, you didn't make provisions. Instead, I borrowed money from this person to provide for myself. He is required to take a rabbinic oath that he left provisions for her, and then he is not liable, and she remains responsible for the debt. In other words, if she wants the transactions to be upheld by the court on his return, then she needs to make the demands in the court during the husband's absence. In the above instance, if she sold movable property, claiming that she sold to provide for her subsistence, and the husband claimed that he had left provisions for her, now she is required to take a rabbinic oath that he didn't leave any provisions. In other words, whoever is in a default in a disadvantaged position retains that disadvantage on the husband's return. So if she already sold it, then it's fine. If she did not issue a claim against him, did not borrow money, she didn't sell the property, but instead strained herself to the day during the night and earned a livelihood, she's not entitled to any compensation. Chav Gimel, the following rules apply when a man takes a vow that his wife should not derive any benefit from his property. Whether he specified the span of the vow or did not specify the span of the vow, we grant him an interval of 30 days. If the span of his vow is concluded, or even though it is not concluded, but he has his vow annulled, this is acceptable. If not, he must divorce his wife and pay her the money due her because of her ketubah. During those 30 days, she should work and attempt to sustain herself through her labor, and one of her husband's friends should provide her with those things she needs that she cannot purchase through the fruits of her labor, if the fruits of her labor are not sufficient for her. In other words, this vow that he takes is going to end him up costing him a lot more, but that's the arrangement that we make for the interim. When a person makes a vow preventing his wife from tasting one of the species of produce, he should be given an interval of 30 days. If he prolongs the situation beyond this time, he is required to divorce her. and pay the money due by the virtue of her ksuba, even when his vow prevents her from eating undesirable food or a species that she has never tasted in her life. In other words, if the husband makes a vow and starts boxing in her ability to exercise her rights, he's basically heading to a divorce with all the responsibility that it will carry for him. The following rules apply when a woman took a vow not to partake of a particular species of produce and her husband allowed the vow to stand, or she took a Nazarite vow and he did not annul it. If he desires to remain married to her and for her not to partake of the species or to be a Nazarite, he may. If, however, he says, I do not desire a woman with vows, he may divorce her, but he's required to pay her the money due her because of her ksuba. The rationale is that he had the option to nullify her vow, and instead he willingly allowed the vow to stand. And therefore, his other option, if he doesn't want to annul the vow, is to go through with the divorce. Any questions?
No, Rabbi.
Nothing, Rabbi.
Yeah. Chodesh Tov and Shabbat Shalom.
Of Martin, Chodesh Tov David,
Yes.
Ryan, Stephen,
Chodesh Tov, everybody. Chodesh Tov. Shabbat Shalom.
Chodesh Tov.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
No questions, Ken?
Chodesh Tov, everyone.
Oh, good.
Yeah, there was I didn't hear all of it. There was the sound wasn't very good, so I didn't hear everything at the beginning. I'm in fact going to go back on it now just to try and understand a couple of things.
You WhatsApp me the question, I'll answer it in the group. Okay. All the best, everybody. Good Shabbos.
Great. Thanks, Rabbi.
Bye.